Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the current political situation of the country, particularly in terms of the talks that have been underway between the government and the PTI. And we've had two rounds of talks previously as well, with the third round of talks also scheduled for Thursday this week. And it's important, of course, to take that with the ways that we have seen other elements also play in. And that, of course, includes what's happening in the courts. And we know that there has been another deferral with reference to, of course, the case that has been going on against the founder of the PTI and Al-Qadr Trust. And this is important, particularly in terms of how that actually factors in with these negotiations and the kind of linkages that have been drawn with the two. And of course, we've seen that the PTI leaders have come forward and denied all such claims or allegations and reports, saying that there is no such linkage. This is something that has happened in the courts and it's got nothing to do with the government, and there will be no deal, as is being referred to in some reports with reference to what is really going on. And that may be a possibility. But of course, that has been put down by the PTI leadership. And we're going to see what that means, particularly in terms of the way that negotiations continue. And of course, the cases continue as well. And what really is the reason of a no-show by the defense, and what exactly is going to be the way forward in terms of not just the court cases, but also in terms of the dealings and negotiations that are underway with the government. And then, of course, how that also contextualizes with what is going on with military institutions and cases related to May 9th. That is going to be our focus of the discussion today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a senior political analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. And I'll start with you with what you have in mind with reference to what your perspective is regarding the kind of linkages that are being drawn. Of course, there has been a lot of questions, a lot of comments that have been raised with regards to how these negotiations have been taking place and how they're going. But we do see that there is a third round of talks still happening. But what of the linkages that are being drawn with what happened in the courts and what is happening at the negotiating table?
Thank you very much. So, you see two things. First of all, there's the third round of negotiations that are supposed to be held pretty soon. And then, you also have the third delay in the announcement of the verdict in the Al-Qadr Trust case. So now, obviously, it's going to be a bit speculative to try and see whether, there is a very close link between, each delay and each round of talks. But certainly, a lot of, analysts, observers, journalists are drawing the parallels on how, each round of talk and each round of delay in the verdict seem to be going together. Now, obviously, the surprising thing is that, both sides are denying it. The government, obviously, but then also PTI, because in case there is a link, then both sides will get implicated that, they are linking legal issues with political issues. So, there is death silence from the government, and the PTI is vociferously denying that, the delay was because of, any links with, the political talks. But compared to, the last two delays were because of, holidays and then, the absence of the judge. This time the delay is because, the accused failed to appear in the court, and the delay is much smaller. So it seems now that since the delay is so small, that 17th January, it would be very odd if the verdict is still not announced, because next time I think the judge will have the option, even if the accused don't turn up, of announcing the verdict based on the fact that he's already given one delay because of that. So it's all interesting, but then on the side of the talks, at least things are moving very, very slowly, very, very incrementally. But now we have a situation where PTI is willing to give its demands in writing. The demands are quite whittled down. They are down to one or two. Now it's not clear whether these will be the complete list of demands or whether this is the initial list of demand. It relates to a judicial commission for what happened on November 26th and May 9th, the year before that, and then the release of its prisoners. So, on the face of it, these are not huge demands, but whether they are the precursor to larger demands, that needs to be seen. So in some sense, at least we are moving incrementally. The PTI has given up on its threats of further street protests and so on. There is still the threat of some sort of a civil disobedience. Then that hasn't really taken a strong form in case of repeated calls or any practical action. So I would say things are at least much better than where they were a month ago.
Right, and Dr. Niaz, there's also the fact that as you mentioned, that there's 17th of Jan, where we're hoping, of course, to hear the announcement of the verdict. But there's also, of course, the third round that is scheduled on the 16th. And again, this linkage is reportedly being drawn that there is this third round happening before what we're going to hear from the courts. Do you think there's any truth in that?
Well, this is straight into the realms of speculation. I clearly do not have, the kind of inside information to, give anything definitive on that. Some of our, journalist friends here on the panel might have, more juicy news, but I hope there is no linkages for the sake of, the integrity of our legal system. I hope it's not being made, hostage in such a way to the unfolding politics. That would be really bad for the country.
Absolutely. And Faisal, I'd love your take on that as well, because you also seem to have a response to that. But add to that also what Dr. Niaz mentioned regarding the demands. And while, of course, it narrows down to 2, which is a small number, but what of the demands in itself, whether or not that is something that the government will be able to actually provide, will be able to execute with reference to the legal system and the judiciary, and whether or not that is something that is also acceptable when we talk about how these talks have been continuing in the past with reference to what has happened both recently in November and then, of course, May 9th previously.
Yes, and obviously when we talk about the demands, and one ultimate demand obviously was related to the PTI former chairman's meetings with his lawyers and with whoever wanted to meet him in the jail. I think that has been carried out by the government in accordance to the practices of the jails that are already in place. And in accordance to that, of course, they are already meeting, and that's why we are seeing that whatever the pressers they have been holding and the media talks they have been holding outside of the jail or somewhere else, they have been doing it on the basis of that, whichever the talk they had with the former chairman Imran Khan, and I think that is already been accepted. So there is positivity from the government side as well. And when we talk about PTI's former chairman, there is a clear stance from the that side as well, that they don't want to include any of their cases or bring any of their cases or pending decisions to the cases to the table of negotiations between the talks between the government benches and the opposition benches. So that is clear that even from the opposition side, former chairman of PTI hasn't put anything on the table related to his own cases, be it the current case that is going to be decided on 17th of January. And it's a coincidence that next date for the, of course, talks between the treasury benches and the opposition is on 16th. Otherwise, I think we know how the courts work. Courts, they of course have a mechanism through which, of course, they give the verdicts. If they couldn't find the accused to be there, of course, Begum Bushra Bibi, she was obviously expected to be there, but she couldn't be there in time. So that's why the judge, he announced the next date for it. And this is the normal practice, that they do give the date, the next date, in accordance to their own practice and own availability as well. If they are available on 17th, they have given the date for 17th. If they would have been available before that, and if there wasn't any other case to be decided before that date, then it should have been that date. So it's that simple. I think it has nothing to do with whatever the talks are going on between the treasury benches and the opposition. And one thing is for clear, that talks are going on, and that is the beauty of the democracy. Our country is being ruled by democracy, and gone are the days when either of the side used to pull the arms of the establishment or pull the arms of the powerful institutions to drag them into the politics, and at the same time keep on talking in their presses that the institutions should stay away from the politics and they should be apolitical. They are apolitical, and now is the time for the politicians to sit down together, and in accordance to their political practices, they need to figure out where does the country stand and how the country must be ruled, by whom it should be ruled, and I think that's how it should be. And in coming days, of course, the challenges which government has already been facing, the state Pakistan has already been facing in terms of security, in terms of economic security, in terms of economy, and in terms of geopolitical challenges which Pakistan is being faced by. Of course, with the American regime change as well. Of course, Biden is going, and then Trump is coming into the Oval Office, and that has a lot to, of course, it needs to be figured out how the next 4 years are going to be aligned of Pakistan with the rest of the world, and how Pakistan places itself geopolitically, and of course, where does Pakistan stand in terms of whatever is going on in the world. So to me, I think all of the politicians, be they the opposition side or be the treasury side, all of them, they are very honorable, very respectable, and all of them they have a huge responsibility of the people of Pakistan, and they are the ones who have to decide that how the things should move on. One thing, me being a Pakistani, I expect from all of the politicians to simply get to conclusions as soon as possible, and I think sooner they do, better it is for Pakistan.
Right, absolutely. And Farrukh, I want your take on this as well, particularly in terms of course, how these relations are being created and what they mean in terms of what's going on in the courts and negotiating table. But also add to that what Faisal has been saying, because there is also a lot of linkage again being drawn between what goes on in the US or the presidency over there to particularly the PTI's founder and what goes on in Pakistan's political situation. Is there any link to that, and why are these links being created?
Right, Sana, Nassim Nicholas Taleb actually came up with a term called ludic fallacy, right? It is from Greek ludus, which means games. So the fallacy is when you apply or misapply or think that because games have a limited set of variables and also has a limited set of laws, so in real life that is the case also. That is never the case, right? There are going to be too many variables, but what are the best ways to judge what is happening, right? Earlier, conspiracy theories were mentioned. What are conspiracy theories? Conspiracy theories are where you cannot directly build a relationship between cause and effect. The causal line is broken, you cannot verify it, therefore you keep on saying that so and so was in that city and at that time this thing happened, ergo he must be responsible, right? This is how Pakistan's media's narrative actually rolls. This is how our pundits actually comment, right? They don't need any evidence. Your earlier question regarding delay in this and this verdict and of course negotiations, that connection is repeatedly being made. But with your respect, if you are going to go there, then there's another thing. There's a very powerful man who is not even being arrested so far, and his name is Malik Riaz, and he was the man who was responsible for this 190 million pounds, right? And yet our private television channels keep on showing reports of him launching new societies, new projects in Dubai. So Is there no possibility that because of this whole thing, his own name also comes into disrepute? He might be actually running some kind of intervention campaign. So, if you want to actually build castles on conspiracy theories, then Donald Trump, of course, Donald Trump, as if he is going to be Amir al-Momineen of Pakistan, right? He is not. He is an American president, and Pakistan lives in its own realities. One reality, and here is the cause, and here is the effect. Cause is that Chairman PTI, or former Chairman PTI, and his wife had to appear before the court. They did not. Effect, it has been delayed, right? Now I can attribute so many things to it that time will end, but I keep on coming up with more conspiracy theories. But the fact is, on one side this is happening, on the other side the second thing which is very important to remember, the dialogue is the only way forward. Why am I saying this? Because this country has been actually self-sabotaging for many decades in the past, right? In 90s, PMLN, People's Party, used to fight among themselves. Then they got some sanity, but General Musharraf was in power. Then everybody tried to actually bring him down. He came down, then we couldn't form governments without each other's support, and then had to actually sabotage each other. When People's Party and PMLN learned that they have to work in tandem, at that time PTI all of a sudden emerged. So right now the best way forward for Pakistan's future is, A, we have a Charter of Democracy 2.0 between the all major parties. And second thing is, then you have to have a grand national dialogue to define, to put in place the guardrails of democracy and constitutionalism that define institutions and their roles, because frankly, everybody in opposition keeps on complaining about institutions. But when these institutions are working in your favor, I don't hear any complaints. Do you? So, why not actually come together and decide these are the parameters and we have to follow them? And then take all institutions. I mean, judiciary. I mean, army is not essentially a pillar state, but it is an important power within the executive. So, army, intelligence agencies, your judiciary, your parliament, your political parties, your state structure, even media and business owners, they all need to actually come together and define rules of game. Without that, what you are going to do is, one party is in government, other parties come together and try to bring it down, and everybody keeps on lambasting each other, and the country is lost in the woods.
Right. Dr. Niaz, I want your take on that as well, particularly in terms of the stakeholders that can or should be involved. We've, of course, seen that there is a lot of linkage, particularly in the demands as well, with May 9th. And, of course, that is a very important aspect of the PTI. And then its linkage with General Faisal Mead's case. And then, of course, the way that things are going to move forward with the negotiating table as well. So I want your take on whether or not it's a possibility for any element of the military institutions or the establishment to be part of the negotiating table, and whether or not that should be the case, considering this linkage with May 9th and the context with regards to General Faisal's case.
Okay. Yeah, before I do that, just one small thing to point out. Now the verdict is going to be announced on 17th, which I believe is a Friday. And as we know, a lot of big verdicts in Pakistan's history which go against the opposition have been announced on Friday, and that keeps getting mentioned. So let's see what happens on this Friday. Now, back to your point, whether, the establishment should be part of the negotiations or not. Obviously, the dialogue should take place between politicians, and things should be decided by politicians. Anybody who stands for civilian supremacy will vehemently insist on that. But then, what do you do with the elephant in the room? How do remove it from the room so that, just the political parties are left in the room to decide? It's one thing to say that, they should not be part of the negotiations, the overt negotiations, but then there is another thing that even if you remove them from the room, would they still continue to influence the negotiations from a back room or not? That is the main thing. How do we stop the establishment from being involved in politics? And I know Farrukh mentioned another charter of democracy being signed by the three parties, and that would be wonderful. The first thing would be whether the three parties can agree to that. I mean, PMLN and PPP agreed to it eventually after a lot of years. So we can hope that now even PTI will show the same maturity and will sign up a charter of democracy. But then will that be the end of it, just because these three parties sign a charter of democracy? What about the incentives of the establishment to interfere in politics? It has strong incentives which are not going to disappear just because these three parties sign a document. Obviously, it will apply every pressure that it can think of, every trick that we've seen over the decades, and then whether the three parties will be able to withstand that pressure, that is the real question, not just the signing of the charter of democracy. So it's a long process of the parties coming to an agreement and then sticking to it despite all the pressure that might be applied on them after they sign. Then, Farrukh also mentioned an interesting thing about, conspiracy theories where, journalists tie two things. So this person was in the city and then this happened. So you automatically assume that this person must have done it. But then, if you see cases being built on conspiracy theories, then how about that? So the Al-Qadir case is that, first of all, money was transferred from UK, and the government decided to give it back to Malik Riaz. And then the second thing that has happened is that Malik Riaz gave some money in the Al Qadir Trust and so on. So the prosecutor is linking the two facts, that the government gave the $190 million because Malik Riaz would then eventually give this money. So how do you link that? Those two things have happened. But unless there is concrete evidence of a link between the two, you cannot just automatically assume. What could be that evidence? The testimony of a key witness, like Malik Riaz himself, and he's sitting in Dubai ever since this whole thing has happened. So on what basis will the prosecution prove that these two events were linked to each other? Just assume or present some evidence? That is the question.
Right. And Faisal, I want your perspective on the way that we've, of course, seen this negotiating table take place, and then, of course, how it's moved forward, and linking that with, of course, the way that this involvement by the institutions may or may not be there. And while, of course, that is something that is discussed with reference to the political leaders also mentioning it and to different reports coming out, there's always, of course, a lot that we've seen as part of what has happened so far with regards to the discussions and the demands and what is being put forward by both the sides. But what can we expect then, irrespective of what's happening in the courts, of how things can actually proceed at the negotiating table, and whether or not there is that aspect of diplomacy that is not happening in terms of what we see as part of these two committees meeting, but of course other elements, even political elements, being involved in some sort of diplomatic efforts.
Yeah, that's a very tricky and very good question, and I think this is where the whole equation lies. And when we talk about, of course, both of the sides, negotiating on the table, first of all, the consensus, I don't see that kind of consensus in which, of course, there is, national reconciliation, and there is a point of sort of acceptance from the both sides in which they both can accept each other's existence. Why I don't see it? Because if we look at PTI as a political party, the whole narrative it actually circulates around the accountability, and if they let go the accountability factor, then of course their own narrative is shattered. And if we look at the current stance of PTI as a political party and its former leadership's stance right now, it shows that they are setting a mark, a point in the politics of Pakistan, in which they believe in being accountable, even if there are cases. I mean, we know that there were more than 150 cases against the former chairman of PTI, and all of them cases, they are being fought by the party itself. And even now on the negotiating table, they are not bringing them cases, and they say that they want to, of course, fight them in the courts, and they believe the justice system of Pakistan. And I think for the future, all of the political parties, they need to develop this kind of discourse in the politics of Pakistan, in which the utmost trust should be built in the constitution of Pakistan, in the delivery of law in Pakistan, in the justice system of Pakistan. And I think that's how the the democracy can, of course, flourish more in Pakistan. But when we obviously talk about on the negotiating table, the stance from both of the sides, I mean, they can reach to a consensus for a better Pakistan, in terms that the security challenges and the economic challenges which are being faced by Pakistan, but at the same time a sort of a backdoor channel can be created, in which all of the political parties, they can get leverage, in terms of nobody gets the blame, and at the same time nobody is suffering out of whatever happens, whatever the outcome is of these negotiations. So to me, I think it all revolves around all getting the upper hand, at the same time not letting go their political stance. So
but how are they going to come to a conclusion then?
Well, I think they would all agree upon leaving it up to the judicial system of Pakistan. And how,
and what's the point of the talks?
Well, the talks would be agreeing upon leaving it up to the judicial system of Pakistan,
Okay.
and the justice must be delivered. And I think that is what it's all about, and this is where the things are heading. To me, I think all of the sides, they will be of course restraining from further sort of getting head on, and the more they get head on, ultimately all of the political parties, they believe that the ultimate loss is of Pakistan, not of a political party at all. And all of the political parties, they are of course thinking about a better Pakistan in future, and I think that's the way forward. And whatever the differences there are, one thing is for sure, that for Pakistan, they have to put them on a side and think better about Pakistan.
Right, absolutely, and that should definitely be the case. But Farrukh, I want to know then what value addition is being done, or what is being gained when we talk about these political negotiations in light of what is happening in the judiciary. Because with reference to what Faisal is saying, I want to know how these two are aligned in any way, or how they'll run in parallel. If it is up to the courts, and if it is what is being decided, then why are these political negotiations taking place, and what aspects can they really add in terms of any consensus or any addition to the political landscape?
Right. I hope that we have some time, right?
Yeah.
I just wanted to actually, I want to answer your beautiful question, which is a very important question, right? But I wanted to comment on what Faisal earlier was saying regarding PTI's power, and then I wanted to address a few other questions also. Faisal is under the impression that PTI exists because it keeps on talking about accountability. I've been around for enough time, and I've been a journalist for enough time, that I have learned how much flexibility, moral flexibility there is in Pakistan's politics. So our politicians might say one thing, but they can always backtrack, and there hasn't been consequences for them because there is a system behind every party's politics, right? Now, why is PTI successful or was successful? It is not because it has a slogan or another slogan. I remember in 2013 elections, Ijaz Shafiq Gilani, one of the best psephologists that I know in Pakistan, called us over, a lot of journalists. And there he gave a presentation that, PMLN has won, but look at PTI. Why? Because there seems to be a lot of upward mobility in the society, the new urban elite, and they want to have a say in politics. And these old parties have actually a system which is somehow congealed. So these people cannot join. Remember, this government's current cabinet. Look at what PMLN had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Similarly in People's Party. So it seems that it is very difficult to include new people. But the party that allows these people to come and actually move upwards, it gets more people and it gets more ownership as well. This has been the strength of party. It is plainly based on demand and supply. The moment other parties actually correct their models, they are going to have equal kind of, perhaps not as quickly, but they are going to have some success as well. Now, regarding what Dr. Saab was saying about courts, and of course conspiracy theories. Look, the case that is in a court, there it becomes an issue of the court. They are going to decide what is fact and what are the connectors. I'm not even speculating on that, right? My humble submission was that in Pakistan's narrative, the Overton window that is publicly accepted opinions is defined by our pundits, and I don't mean the current company, I mean people who are sitting on Urdu channels and who are continuously, dishing out conspiracy theories about everything. Most of the people, they talk about economy, they talk about international politics, they have no clue what is happening in the world, right? But somehow they end up shaping public opinion because they're accessible and they get you good ratings. And this is the problem that I've got in this country, that someday we have to apply a rational mind and we have to start thinking like actual analysts, right? Regarding, this 190 million pound case, of course, it is something that is in courts and there is a prosecution, it is pushing the case, and the court is going to decide, and after that there are multiple floors to go for any kind of recourse, right? Now, because Faisal Sahab also very kindly, and this actually brings me back to your question, that if they are going to only talk about courts, what exactly is going to happen? No, this is not it. The Charter of Democracy was a multi-dimensional document. It spoke about provinces and their relations. It spoke about federation and its relations concurrently as the constitution. It also spoke about economy and FC award. It also spoke about not using the word that Faisal used, accountability, for political vendetta or victimization. So all these things, when these parties sit together, they actually decide how they are going to play the game. Now, when I mentioned the institutions and another dialogue, that was not, compared to this one. I was talking about another concept that was presented by Murtaza when he was Chairman Senate, Grand National Dialogue. Someday you have to decide that all these institutions, may it be army, may it be judiciary, may it be intelligence agencies, they have an opinion, and those opinions, whether you consider them legitimate or not, actually arise from their own concerns about certain things. And this is why things keep on happening. This is why there's always a possibility that if these three parties come together and sign another COD, there might be a fourth party all of a sudden which starts getting billionaires and their support, which starts getting intelligence and everything under the sun. Why? Because they are legitimate, differences of opinion and cracks within the structure. So why not actually, instead of papering it over and claiming that everything is hunky-dory, you actually bring the people together, whatever way possible, and you ask them to define what are your concerns and let us fix them, for heaven's sake.
But what is that way where we make that possible?
Well, I just talk, what else? Bring them together.
But
and
we've been
make
doing
them
that,
talk.
but it hasn't reached that conclusion, or that hasn't come out of it.
No, you are again.
So how do we ensure that?
My humble submission
Yes.
was that there are two very different processes we are talking about. One is what is going on between the government and opposition.
Yeah.
There has to be another one which
Yeah.
hasn't started.
I
So
get that.
you cannot actually talk about what is going to come out of it because it hasn't started.
No, I agreed. But what I meant was that we've been, in terms of Pakistan's history, this is something that has been mentioned so many times, but we haven't been able to actually achieve it.
Yeah, the point is when Raza Rabbani was there, he brought one of the chief justices to the Senate and he spoke there, right? And this is how you begin actually to comparing notes. Similarly, army chief was brought in many a times to the parliament as well, and at that time DJISI also. You can have new rules of game. All you have to do is realize that constitution actually, although it evolved and although it was actually a social contract which everyone came together, and dictators have been trying to get rid of it, but they have to bring it together. So there must be some buy-in. But even then, what you need, Sana, is to ensure how those laws are applied. At this moment, all of a sudden, when there comes to snooping or something of that sort, we learn that there are not even bylaws that govern intelligence organizations. How, pray, are you then actually governing, right? There have to be laws. There have to be some kind of guardrails to ensure what you can do, what you cannot do, how you can earn, how you can spend. So all these things have to be brought together. And somebody with vision will have to do it. I hope that this government does it. I hope that this president, by the way, president is better placed to do that because he is the head of the entire state structure. He can bring everybody together. Let's have that. If you cannot have it in public eye, do it privately, do it hush-hush, but do it, please.
Right. Dr. Niaz, I want your take on this as well, both in terms of what's going on with the opposition and the government, and what can we hope to achieve, irrespective of what's going on in the courts, irrespective of anything else, what can possibly be achieved as a good outcome of these talks. And secondly, with reference to a larger political consensus, something, of course, that is needed on so many fronts. I want your take on how do we make that possible, given the fact that at the end of the day, it will boil down to the people and to the will or to the sincerity with which that actually takes place. And of course, that has eluded us till now. But is there a possible way in finding that?
Yeah, I think we first of all have to get a better grip on what the contours of the dialogue will be, because it's happening very incrementally. So now PTI is down to two main demands about release of the political prisoners and then judicial commissions for those two incidents that happened on May 9th and November 26th. But then that's a very small part of its overall grievances. Its main grievances started and related to the elections, the February 8th elections, and its charges that they are rigged, and because of that then it held those protests on November 26th and even a few before that. And then there is the issue of November of the 26th amendment. So the question really is that these two demands, if they are met by the government, will that be the end of the demands for the PTI? And then what is it offering in return? Because that's a strange thing. The government has asked PTI to give its demands in writing, but then it hasn't asked PTI what it will give up if those two demands are met. Will it, then just accept these assemblies for the rest of the period? Will it, then just participate as a normal opposition party within, the parliamentary structure? So there is still a lot of unknowns from what we've seen of PTI. I really doubt it that it will be satisfied if these two demands are met, irrespective of what the Judicial Commission finds. There is still the issue, and it's not just an issue for PTI; it's an issue for the whole nation, for the health of democracy. That we need to find out what actually happened on February 8th. It's as important, or in fact, even more important than what happened on November 26th and May 9th. Were those elections free and fair? Does this government have a legitimate mandate? And then obviously, the issues around 26th Amendment and how it's made, the judiciary subservient. So, uh, there's still so many issues that have still not even become part of the dialogue, and which are so critical for the country. To say that if these two demands are met, that will be the end of it, then everybody will be able to live happily ever after. I don't think so. There's still too many issues outstanding for us to have real political stability.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Niaz, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for being part of the debate as always. Of course, much remains to be seen as to what happens this week, but both the third round of talks and the court's announcement are scheduled for later this week, and we'll be here to talk about it. That's all that we have from the debate today. We'll now see you tomorrow.